This week, Israel evicts the residents of the new settlement in Samaria called Evyatar. This raises the question, are settlements in the West Bank illegal according to international law? Luke, just as we kick off, I've just got to say, I'm completely fed up with the international hatred, just complete hatred of Israel. Guys, stay tuned for all this and much more right here on the Joshua and Caleb Report.
In a world plagued with anti-Israel propaganda, Paul Yavel presents the Joshua and Caleb Report, a positive voice of truth straight from Israel's heartland.
Hello and welcome to the Joshua and Caleb Report, where we believe that in a world of negativity and fake news, every Christian should be connected to the life and positivity that Israel brings to the world. I'm Luke Hilton, here with Joshua Waller. We are on the Mount of Blessing deep in the biblical heartland of Israel. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the bell too, because you don't want to miss out on any new videos that we're bringing out on this channel. And leave us a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Join the conversation. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of people every single week. Josh, we have to say thank you to several people that joined the monthly support team this past week on Patreon. We had Lev join the team at the $50 per month level. Thank you so much. And we also had on the Joshua and Caleb site, we had Edward Jr. joined at the $100 per month level, and Michael joined at the $45 per month level. Thank you so much for supporting the mission and cause here at the Joshua and Caleb Network. And if you want to join us and help us produce more and better content straight from Israel's biblical heartland, you can go to patreon.com/Joshua and Caleb, or just go to joshuaandcaleb.com and you can join the team there. Josh, big story in the news is that even though with Israel's semi-right-wing government, or at least right-wing prime minister, there has been a eviction that happened from a new settlement here in Samaria, but wasn't like the normal eviction. You want to kind of explain what's going on here, because it was almost like the left and the right-wing camps were both happy. So what's going on
this
here?
has consumed the news of Israel this week. It's been the number one topic across the country, is this small little community of Evyatar, which both you and I have both been to. We're very close, even as we sit here right now. The defense minister ordered a verdict that the eviction of this settlement had to happen. They met together. The local council got together with the right wing, that happened to be the prime minister and the interior minister, Ayelet Shaked, and the Naftali Bennett, the new prime minister, and they tried to create a way to get around it. How can they do this to where they won't destroy? Because here's the backdrop, Luke. The government says you can't just build a community like this. And they say eviction order means basically the people are going to be taken out and the bulldozers are going to come in, they're going to destroy it. Okay?
Which, by the way, this settlement, it was a little bit unusual. They made major advances just within a matter of several months. And they had paved roads, they had a roundabout, they had like
over 50 families
that were living there. So it developed into a pretty thriving town very quickly.
So by the end of the day, Luke, the defense minister put a verdict. You've got to leave, and the other guys were able to come in. The right-wing guys were able to come in and pull a deal together that said, okay, listen, we're going to evict. The people are going to leave, but on the basis that we're going to be able to come back if they're going to do their map research, and they're going to see if the community is actually on legal ground, and we're going to get to that in a second. Yeah. Crazy, the actual story behind this. And they're going to establish a yeshiva, a Jewish learning school, to learn the Torah there for students to come and learn.
And the military was going to use it as a base in the meantime,
correct.
Which basically means that they're not going to bulldoze anything.
So they're going to take 6 months. Watch it. No way it's going to take 6 months. They've put it into the courts, Luke. So now it's stopped. Give it. I don't know. I don't want to be negative, but years and years locked up in a court battle. But Luke, listen. This land is Israeli state land. It's Area C. There's A, B, and C. Area C is the land that is, according to the Oslo Accord signed in 1995, which is quite a while ago now, that land belongs to the state of Israel, and the state of Israel can decide what it wants to do with that land. It's not, there's no, the Oslo Accords.
Area A, Area B, or private Palestinian land. Area C, which also is under the jurisdiction of the Shomron Regional Council. So the local governing body,
owns it.
Yeah, they have the zoning for it.
So with all of that in the backdrop, we're getting an eviction order to Jews, creating a new town on Jewish land, Israeli land. It's not sectioned off or anything else. It's like sectioned for this. It's like, this is what it's for, right? Okay. That's where the international pressure gets enormous.
Right.
And that's where we have a political scene on the table right now, where we have America buddying up with the leftist in Israel right now. And this is where we're at right now.
Right.
And this is our situation in Evyatar at the moment.
So
we don't know what the future looks like,
right,
but it looks like years.
So the reason that the residents left peacefully and that they're semi-happy is that nothing's being bulldozed, and they're going to survey the land with hopefully to be able to come back and live there one day. The reason why the left-wing camp is happy is because everybody got evicted and they all pulled out, and they know they can keep it tied up for years and years and years if they want to. And nothing might even happen there.
Luke, but we got to take this situation now at this opportunity that this is the story of Israel. This is what's going on.
Right.
We're going to dive into this because it's so important for us to understand. Everybody says, and this is everybody, you hear it right, left, center, everywhere, you hear settlements illegal according to international law.
Right.
We've got to set the record straight. Is Israel, first we got to start with, is Israel occupying the West Bank?
Right.
We've got
I want to clarify before I start, too, because you can have basically the international community thought, including lawyers, legal experts, scholars. You can have the international thought that agrees and says Israeli settlements are illegal according to international law and Israel is an occupying power. You can have that as an international thought, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the truth. And hang on, okay, because we're going to actually show you very easily, very simply, exactly why, okay? You ready?
Go for it.
Number one, is Israel occupying the West Bank? Was the definition of an occupying power. One power occupying the lands of a foreign sovereign. So for Israel to be an occupying power in the West Bank, they would have to be occupying it from another sovereign country.
So who would that be, Luke?
So who was here before 1967 when Israel conquered the land?
Palestinians?
Jordan. Surprise, okay?
What?
Who was here before that? We'll get into it in a second. Palestine has never been a sovereign nation. They've never been a sovereign power.
Yeah.
How could Israel occupy Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria? By the way, the name Judea, what is that? I mean, just the name in and of itself.
I mean, Luke, think about it. Okay, we've said this a million times on the show. China, what is it like?
Jews live
Chinese,
in Judea.
Okay, yeah.
Very simple. Okay?
Americans, where they live. Huh?
And by the
America.
way, too, we now know that there's been a Jewish presence, a continuous presence in Israel for thousands and thousands of years.
Judea.
Even under the Ottoman Turkish Empire, even under Muslim empires back in 1,000 years ago, there was always Jews living in Judea, always Jews living in Israel. By the way, the Palestinians agreed themselves under the Oslo Accords to negotiate with Israel regarding the issue of settlements. Okay, we're going to get here into settlements more in a second. Doesn't that make them legitimate from the Palestinian side, even in themselves? And by the way, when you talk about 1967, everyone says we're going to establish a Palestinian state. We're going to go back to pre-1967 borders, right?
Yeah, what's that?
The term, when you're talking about 1967 borders, that's a non-existent term. Borders are lines that are drawn between two countries, okay? Israel proper and the West Bank are not two different countries. It's not a country of Palestine because it's not a sovereign nation. It's not a sovereign power, right?
We're talking about international law here, Luke.
You're talking about armistice lines. You're talking about ceasefire lines. Jordan and Israel in the War of 1967 were fighting, Jordan and the West Bank, Israel, and they called a ceasefire. An Israeli officer and a Jordanian officer met in a hotel somewhere, and they said, here's where our troops are, here's where our troops are, and they drew lines, and that is the borders of what they call the 1967 borders today. Okay, important to remember. Okay, now we're going to get into international law. Okay, are the settlements actually illegal according to international law?
Luke, and also what you just said is that's internationally accepted.
Yes.
Borders are what you described, and armistice lines are what you described. There's not separate laws for Israel and every other nation. At the UN, and we'll get to that, the UN thinks that there's separate laws for Israel and then there's separate laws for everywhere else. So back to it.
100%. And we'll get into the hypocrisy of the UN too. Stay tuned as well. Okay, so international law, you've heard it. Israeli settlements are illegal according to international law. Well, if you're out there and someone ever says that to you, the easiest thing to say back in return is, which law? Okay, just show me the law, because there is no such international law. It's not, you cannot find it. You can Google all day long and all night. You will not find it anywhere, right? It's important, though, to understand that UN resolutions, because there's been a whole lot of them passed in the United Nations against Israel. It's important to understand UN resolutions are not international law in and of themselves. They might influence or help interpret or understand international law, but they're not legislation from any country, right?
It's a resolution. It's like they're presenting something for the nations.
UN resolutions have power. They have influence, like I was saying, around the world, but they're not law in and of themselves. Okay, we're going to talk about 2 UN resolutions here in a minute. But before we get to that, you might, if you know your history, you might say, okay, well, what about the Geneva Convention?
Yeah.
Okay. Article 49 of the Geneva Convention. I'm going to read part of it here in a second. But first, just to set the stage, Article 49 of the Geneva Convention speaks of a sovereign power in a territory that it is occupying.
Yeah.
Okay. And we already made it clear.
What's occupying? Yeah.
Israel cannot occupy its own territory.
Correct.
Who was in the West Bank in the early 1900s and late 1800s? Ottoman Turks, right? Who was here after that? British Mandate.
Yeah.
Who was here after that? Jordan occupied the West Bank for 19 years, 1948 to 1967. By the way, they tried to annex it. No, nobody even recognized it. They could never actually bring it into Jordan. Then 1967, Israel's fighting a war of defense. They conquer the area, right? Okay, set the stage. Israel's not a sovereign power occupying someone else's territory. Okay, now, fact. So before we even get into the Geneva Convention, it doesn't apply.
Yeah.
Because by definition, Israel's not a sovereign power occupying a different territory.
Correct.
But let's just, for the sake of the argument, say that it does apply to Israel. Here we go. Article 49, number 1 states, individual or mass forcible transfers as well as deportations of protected persons from occupied territory to the territory of the occupying power or to another country, occupied or not, are prohibited. What does that mean?
Government can't take people and put them over here.
If you occupy another nation, you can't take the protected people from there and just kick them out. Right. Israel moves in 1967. They haven't been deporting, transferring out the local population of Palestinians, regardless of what the world says. I did my research. By the way, source links for everything we're talking about today are in the description, so go check it out for yourself. Okay, so that's number 1. Israel has not removed the Palestinian population from the West Bank. Correct. Article 49, number 6 states the occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. Okay, basically moving their own civilian population into the territory it occupies. So for the sake of argument, if this applied to Israel, which it does not, like we said, would that apply? And by the way, the clause was intended to prevent like a World War II practice of an occupying power transferring portions of its own populations to occupied territory to colonize the territories, worsen the economic situation of the native population, and endanger their separate existence as their own race. So basically just take over, kick everybody out, make life horrible. You saw it happening in World War II, the Germans moving people into Poland and like enslaving the local Poles or kicking them out and moving German people in. Okay, that type of
It's an old world practice. Right? It's big time. It's all over history.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Okay, number 1, Israel has never deported or transferred parts of its own civilian population into the West Bank. Key. You might be saying, what about the settlements, right? Okay, key. That's my MacBook Pro right there. 2, the settler movement was born on its own, separate from the government. Okay? Right. The settler movement was a movement of the people. There have been some governments that have semi-supported the settler movement. None have really like fully endorsed it and actually put resources into the settlements. And number 3, the settlement movement has not worsened the economic situation of the Palestinians, but has actually bettered it. How do we know this? Because they're providing the community that we're sitting next to right now. They're providing the Palestinians with jobs every single day. Israel collects the revenue for the Palestinian Authority, provides them with water and electricity, and provides them with jobs in the industrial parks and the factories. Okay, so Geneva Convention. First off, it doesn't apply. Secondly, Israel has not violated any of Article 49 of the Geneva Convention. We'll be right back with the rest of the show, but first I wanted to tell you about our new book. It's called Facing Jerusalem. You know, Christianity is in trouble. Every day our faith is attacked and often watered down. Those who are zealous for their faith are few in number, or they're not willing to speak up. A lot of young people are even leaving the faith of their childhood to chase the dream of this world. If we look carefully at the Bible, we find that God gives us hope through an ancient prayer. This prayer unlocks the door to forgiveness and God's favor in our lives. It all goes back to the dedication of the temple in Jerusalem when Solomon prayed for the nations. Solomon prayed for you. Many times when Christianity is seeking repentance and revival today, however, the key ingredient is left out, and it's facing Jerusalem. I was privileged to co-author this book, Facing Jerusalem, along with Zach Waller. Filled with our personal stories, this book paints a beautiful picture of how all believers should care about and recognize Jerusalem's key role in the redemption of the world. Solomon asked God to answer the prayer of those from the nations that look toward and face Jerusalem. Is this prayer still relevant today? Purchase our book at facingjerusalemthebook.com or click the link in the description below. You can even enter the promo code Joshua and Caleb for a special listener-only discount. Order your copy today and experience God's plan of redemption and blessing in your life. Just go to facingjerusalemthebook.com or click the link in the description below.
Luke, that's a fantastic run through, and I just want to say, just raise your right hand. Go with me. We live here. We testify that everything that you've seen and said is true.
And we try to show it on video.
We try to show, Luke, literally, we go to these Jewish communities. Back in the day, 1984, I think, the Jewish community of Malay Level, we know the founder. We've sat there with him. The local Arabs celebrated the founding of that settlement together with him. You know why they celebrated? Because jobs were going to be brought to the area. New life was being pulled into Samaria and Judea that wasn't there for thousands of years. Because guess what? The Jews were coming back to establish it. And guess what? The Arab locals were excited about it.
Yep.
Luke, that's just truth.
We have the footage and the photos to prove it.
We do. Luke, this is where
they like to say there was peace in the region until peace broke out.
Right.
Meaning the Oslo Accords in 1993.
They've brought nothing but bloodshed.
1980s, ask anyone that lived in the area back then, Arab or Jew, they'll tell you there was perfect coexistence and peace between them and their neighbors.
Luke, let's bring it up to date. We're talking about all this stuff, how it rolls through. We're getting all these details, the truth out that's not being spoken about anywhere. I don't see it anywhere else. Mm-hmm. This is facts. This is historic fact. So what happened? Recently, we had the Obama 2016, right before he left office, left us with this. He wanted to be his legacy, yes, right? Of his finale of a stab to Israel before he leaves. And that was a UN resolution 2334. Right. So people are going to say
December 23rd, 2016. Yeah. So exactly 1 month
before he left office.
Trump took office. Right. The UN Security Council passes a resolution. And the resolution states that Israel's settlement activity constitutes a flagrant violation of international law and has no legal validity. It demands that Israel stop such activity and fulfill its obligations as an occupying power under the Fourth Geneva Convention, which, by the way, it was 14-0 vote voted in favor. The United States abstained, which they could have vetoed it because they have veto power. And it was like the first time, I think it was the first time that they hadn't stood with Israel. It was 100% a stab in the back by the Obama administration. They just wanted to leave their parting gift. This
is where people get sidelined, Luke, into thinking international law is a UN resolution. You explained that already.
Right.
It's just not true. So this is where people will go back. They'll say, well, what about UN resolution 2334? Doesn't that state that settlements are illegal according to international law? Fact. No, it doesn't state that.
But if you do want to say that UN resolutions carry weight, which they do, then let's just see if the UN is actually fair and balanced when it comes to passing resolutions.
Yeah, okay, what else have they said?
By the way, in 2016, 18 resolutions adopted in the General Assembly and in the Human Rights Council were all against Israel, okay? It gets worse. From its creation in June 2006 through June 2016, okay, in their first decade, the UN Human Rights Council adopted 135 resolutions criticizing countries. Guess how many were against Israel?
Yeah.
68. That is more than 50%. 68 out of 135. Okay? It gets even worse. UN General Assembly resolutions. In 27, I'm just going to give a couple examples, and if you want to click it's unwatch.org, link in the description below. You can read even more examples because we don't have the time here. A couple examples. In 2017, 21 of 27 UN General Assembly resolutions that were condemning specific countries targeted Israel. 2017, there was one resolution for Iran, one for Syria, one for North Korea. It goes on. Okay. Hello. Maybe
what
those
has Israel
countries-
done? Yeah.
Syria that's slaughtered more than 500,000 people in the last decade or so. And there's one resolution in 2017 condemning them. 2016, 20 of 26 UN General Assembly condemnatory specific resolutions on countries targeted Israel. That's 77%. There were 3 in that year on Syria and 1 on Iran, North Korea, Crimea. From 2012 through 2015, the General Assembly adopted 97 resolutions total criticizing countries. 83 out of those were targeted against Israel. Israel, the only democracy promoting freedom in the entire Middle East, and the UN has a long-standing history of singling them out, targeting them. More than 50%, sometimes close to 90% of the resolutions are against Israel. It's that, and that is why, number one, UN resolutions are not international law, and number two, they can't be counted as valid when you've seen it for yourself. Like I said, click the link, go read tons more examples, see it for yourself, that they are unfairly biased against Israel.
Luke, to nail this coffin completely shut about who the UN is and what, I mean, obviously you just described exactly who they are, but just say, okay, so 1975, they actually put out that Zionism is determined as racism, as a form of racism. This was signed in as a resolution in the UN. UN says Zionism equals racism. That's something that you see on radical crazies, BDS crazies, anti-Israel. That was signed as a resolution in the UN. Zionism equals racism.
In Israel.
What is Zionism? That's Jews returning to Israel. That's racism?
A form of racism.
Okay, so thank God they took it back in 1991. But I'm saying that's the foundation of what the UN is doing. These are ridiculous, unbelievable hatred for no reason against this land and this people, Israel.
Josh, UN aside, it's a little bit confusing if you're an American as far as what U.S. policy is when it comes to the settlements in Judea and Samaria, because it's gone back and forth.
Well, look, we got 1978. We had Carter administration started it because, okay, 1978, we're just starting settlements here. Like, it's very new. First settlement was started in 1971. So we starting to have, they're recognizing something's going on in Judea and Samaria, East Jerusalem. Carter administration says, we don't believe this is good in international law. So he said, he starts it. Bad international law. President Reagan comes back and says, no, disagree. I think it's good. And it's good according to international law. And then guess what? We have John Kerry comes in the Obama administration, and he says, illegal, right? And he goes back, right? So, and then that was after a long time. There's a lot of years of like bipartisan, like, okay, we just let the settlements grow. Nobody really wanted to touch the issue. Obama hits the trigger on it again, reverses it back. Settlement's illegal. Then we have obviously the Trump administration. She comes in and he says, absolutely not. There's nothing illegal about this.
Groundbreaking statement from Mike Pompeo.
Mike Pompeo, the Pompeo doctrine turns it all around on its head again. And obviously, again, look, all of this is interpretation based on the actual facts of international law, which nobody put more effort into that than Mike Pompeo himself. He dug relentlessly into this issue and translated all the stuff and said, no, settlements are not illegal according to international law. Lastly, we have our standing administration right now that's basically reversing everything. They have not yet come out and said settlements are illegal according to international law.
They made a lot of vague statements.
They're making vague statements like obstacles to peace. So we see that a lot. But Luke, that's where it stands as of right now. What I want to say is, Luke, is we're having a ton of international pressure. Not only is the American administration saying, we have the Israeli settlements that we've just talked about. There's a whole nother topic that's being ignored. The world is talking about Israeli settlements. Let's put this in a box here for a second. Jews cannot build Jewish towns in Samaria that is a Jewish ancestry from thousands of years, goes back here. They can't build, Luke, on, if you want to go international law, the Oslo Accords stand up in court. You cannot abide by the Oslo Accords. The Oslo Accords say Jews can build on Area C. Arabs are not allowed, according to the Oslo Accords, to build on Area C. We have hundreds of thousands.
Small percentage.
Very small. We have hundreds of thousands of Arabs taking illegally land.
Not only taking, but they're funded by the European Union.
Again, funded by the European Union. And that's what I want to talk about just a second, because Bennett, our new prime minister here in Israel, is targeting this. We got international crisis coming on the scene now. We've got Biden and the American administration saying you can't build, and that pressure is coming from that side. On the other side, Luke, we have the international EU sending literally almost $1 billion since 2000 into establishing, look, it's like a proxy war. Like, this is insanity.
Right.
Jews are not allowed to build, and that's like on the U.S. front. They're like saying, no, Jews can't build in any Jewish areas. Area C doesn't matter. Jews cannot build in any of these areas in Judea and Samaria. On the other side, the EU's funneling through this other back avenue of funding. It's like, and nobody knows about it. $1 billion since 2000
with a B. That's a lot of money.
$1 billion since 2000 just in building structures for one reason.
Illegal.
And that's to create illegal structures. That's like defying. Okay, so they're the ones that are like supposedly holding up international law.
Right.
America, EU, all these places. They're the ones that are like the beacons of staunch international law withholders. Right. They're the ones that are like degrading it from the ground. They're the ones that are shoveling money into an illegal operation. $1 billion into building in Area C, areas that are allocated for Israel. And the reason is to cut Israel off, to create a boundary that Israel can't go past in order to create. It's all with one goal, to create a Palestinian
Israel
state.
Will wake up and there'll be an established Palestinian state funded by the EU. 100% illegal on land that was allocated for Jewish building in Judea and Samaria.
And again, Luke, we're talking about facts here. We're not just making up stuff. This is facts on the ground. You and I, we live here. We breathe this air. We're a part of this culture that's here in Judea and Samaria. We see both the Arab side. We see both the Jewish side. And we're telling people the truth. This is the facts on the ground. Luke, I want to leave people on a positive note. According to the New York Times, Luke, me and you, I just love this quote. And I think I think all of our listeners are going to really love this too. Because according to the New York Times, Luke, you and I, in our work here, is helping Jews. This is like a quote from the New York Times. Right. We're helping Jews.
Well, just to clarify, when we talk about our work, it's not only bringing the truth through media, it's planting trees, harvesting grapes, pruning vineyards. It's agricultural work here in Judea and Samaria, helping Jewish settlement here in the biblical heartland.
That's what we do, and a lot of advocacy at the same time. Helping Jews establish permanence in the Israeli occupied territories. And here's our quote. I love this. Effectively obstructing the creation of a Palestinian state. Luke,
that's it.
We're doing it. We're effectively obstructing the creation of a Palestinian state, which means we're effectively building a Jewish state.
Building up Zion.
We're building a Jewish state. Come on, folks. If you're not excited about building the Jewish state, I don't know what's wrong with you. Like, this is a miracle that's happening in our literal time right now. And every force in the entire world is standing up against it. It's time to get on the bandwagon and build this Jewish state.
So, guys, even if the entire international community, even if they are experts and professors or scholars, whoever it is, even if they believe and are on the side that Israel is occupying the West Bank or that settlements are illegal under international law, now you know the truth. Send them this program right here. Share the Joshua and Caleb Report. Please share our YouTube channel. This is the truth. These are the facts. Please check out all of our sources in the link in the description below. Let us know what you think in the comments. And in the meantime, be strong, be courageous, and be the voice of Joshua and Caleb in your generation. Hi guys, if you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We also have tons more incredible content straight from Israel's heartland, which you can find completely free at joshuaandcaleb.com. If you're interested in signing up for a life-changing volunteer program in Israel's heartland, you can go to serveisrael.com. We host Christians from all over the world to help plant trees, harvest grapes, prune vines, and basically help farmers all over Judea and Samaria, all while experiencing the land and people of Israel in a way that you're never going to get on a 10-day tour. Just go to serveisrael.com to find out more information.
Yes, I will stand.